Welcome to the Daily Bolster. Each day we welcome transformational executives to share their real-world experiences and practical advice about scaling yourself, your team, and your business.
Welcome to the Daily Bolster. I'm Matt Blumberg, co-founder and CEO of Bolster, and today we are here in deep with Sherisse Hawkins. Sherisse is the founder and CEO of Pagedip, and she is, by her own branding, a corporate escapee, which we will get back to in a couple of minutes. But Sherisse, nice to have you here. Welcome to the Daily Bolster.
Nice to be here.
Let's start by telling everyone what Pagedip is.
Pagedip is a way to create interactive, engaging, but most importantly, measurable documentation. And we help people improve their sales outcomes by being able to measure the efficacy of their content.
That sounds really interesting. Give me a use case.
A great use case is either ESG reports, where people want to understand how those are performing, or helping account executives for SaaS companies improve their sales playbooks and improve their revenue outcomes.
Both of those are high impact in very, very different ways. And certainly the SaaS, enterprise SaaS selling, which is a field that I know really well, if you have a product that's going to improve the velocity of enterprise SaaS selling, you have a very, very good product. So I am glad that Pagedip exists and that you're doing your thing there.
Thank you. We're really excited about it. And like a lot of startups, that wasn't our first use case, but it turned out to be, the gold mine for both us and really making a difference for our customers.
So let's come back to that because figuring out what your product market fit is and pivoting is a great topic. But I'd love to start real quickly with your journey. Real quickly, what's sort of the arc of your career? We can get then at the end of it to the founder journey after you started Pagedip.
Sure.
But how did you get where you got, and why do you call yourself a corporate escapee?
Yeah, I think I coined that term. I'm going to claim I coined that term because I've been talking about it for a long time. I'm an engineer and technologist by degree, and I think in ones and zeros. So I got a couple of engineering degrees and went straight into corporate America. I worked as a Disney Imagineer, designing theme parks around the globe. I worked with video systems, and then I worked at Time Warner Cable, leading up their software development group. And so I had
I remember when I met you, you were in that last job.
Yes.
Right. You had a huge number of engineers reporting to you.
Right. Right.
I've always thought
we were doing amazing things.
Yeah. I mean, I've always thought that Imagineer is probably the best job title ever.
I have to agree with you.
And designing theme parks is pretty cool.
Yes.
How did you get from that into software development?
Oh, every path is circuitous, right? I worked as the Imagineer. And the thing about being an Imagineer is you're taking, usually off-the-shelf equipment and technology, and you're applying it in a really unique and creative way. And I'm one of those people that's a little crazy. I believe that engineering is one of the most creative jobs on the planet, and I think we should talk about it in that way. Yeah. But it taught me that, anything is possible, and just had some great experience. It's also hard. It's also very hard to get things to work in unusual ways.
Yeah. What's the sort of most interesting or fun thing that you worked on at Disney?
I'll pose an open-ended question. There was a project that didn't actually turn into an attraction, but the problem was having to have the ceiling fall like every, couple of minutes and then rebuild itself. And so those are the kind of things that, you get on paper and you're like, well, how are we going to do that from an engineering standpoint? And we figured out a way to do that. So just really creative, unusual problems to solve. It was a great experience. And that led me into more show design and ride design. And that naturally kind of led into an interest in video. And so my next job after Disney was working for a company called Harmonic that did digital encryption for video streams and large equipment rooms. And from there, we sold to Time Warner Cable, and then they recruited me to work for them. And then I started becoming into more of a leadership role and and taking more of the corporate, technical leadership path, which was a great experience. We got to deploy to millions of people and start from a white sheet of paper and develop something completely new. I think that's where the entrepreneurial bug first started, that whole idea of starting from nothing and then developing something that, got deployed to a lot of people.
Yeah, although as you say, like being an engineer and an Imagineer is an inherently creative job as well. So
Yes.
so
Yes.
at the peak at Time Warner, how big was your engineering team that you led?
Oh my gosh. I know I had 12 direct reports, and
Oh
then
wow.
for, how many people were underneath them, how many engineers and testers, I'm sure it was over 150, but I really don't know the total number. And what that also taught me was 12 is my favorite number. Of having a team of 12 is like it's not too big, it's not too small. You can get a lot of things done. You can move pretty quickly. So that was another little lesson that I've applied to, career part 2.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know different leaders are comfortable with different spans of control, and yeah, for some people 12 is way too many.
Mm-hmm.
I also like having a bigger team because it means that I'm sort of closer to the action,
Yeah.
fewer
Yeah.
layers. So
Yeah. A dozen, it's a good number.
yeah. All right, so let's continue. So you're at Time Warner. You're there for about 10 years, right?
Yes.
You're
Yes.
running a giant engineering team. What gives you the bug to start something, and what did you start?
Well, this is the part where people think I'm crazy. My husband still was in a little bit of dismay because imagine I've got this great team. I'm literally sitting in a corner office. It was one of those like out of the movie things. Great benefits. And the theme of all this as we're talking is I like to start new things. And so once the product that we worked on for 10 years was out in the marketplace and it was at steady state and we were sort of making improvements to it, that's not the place that I get the most excitement and joy, even though on paper everything was the perfect job. And so that's where I get antsy and I wanted to start again. And so much to my husband's dismay, on Friday the 13th, I put in my notice and I didn't have a really specific plan. I just knew it was time to do the next thing. And there was also some phenomenal opportunities when, kind of a full class of us left our executive roles, and then a whole new generation of people got to, kind of move up into the ranks and take the company to the next level. So all of that felt really good, but also incredibly scary.
I'm sure. Yeah, I mean that's you're in theory that's as stable a job as you get, and a cash generative job, and everything else. So,
Yes. Yes.
But just curious, what was the 10-year project? Like, what was the project that was
So
out?
most people, including myself, have cut the cord from cable now, but at that time, remember this is quite a long time ago, the software that's inside the cable boxes that allow you to record shows and to deal with daylight savings time, all of the stuff, all the interfaces that you have when you're watching TV, we built that from scratch. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, talk about a mission critical system for most people, right?
Yes.
All right, so you have the entrepreneurial bug. You leave the stability of Time Warner. How'd you get to Pagedip? Or you had a different name at the beginning, right?
We had a different name at the beginning. I say we did one major pivot and 4 micro pivots to get to where we are today. The first idea was around adding interactivity to published long form content like ebooks. And again, this was a while ago. So ebooks were, I wouldn't call it a novelty, but they were time. It was time for them to become a little bit more exciting. And we had a really fantastic, so we developed some software that allowed us to produce interactive ebooks, embed ebooks with a lot of different media components and really cool elements, and allow people to publish those on the major platforms. What I didn't know is how challenging the publishing industry is. The margins there, how difficult it is to be innovative in certain markets.
I was going to say, having published a few books, it is like a very entrenched, slow moving, contemporary
Yes.
process.
You're finding some great adjectives, yes. But what it meant for us is after our first book won a major award at a book show, I came back and realized that we'd made no money. I'm like, okay, this was fun and was very creative, but this is not a business.
Right.
And luckily we had another customer, a potential customer, met us at the book show, said, I want to apply that technology to a completely different use case, more of a business use case. We did some co-creation, some co-development with them. And that was the first small pivot towards more business content and content that is tied to revenue in some way.
Interesting. So it's a different use case, but really, if I think about what you do today and what you originally started, it's a very similar theme, right?
Yes.
Making
Yeah.
digital content, turning it from static to dynamic and doing the measurement around it and everything else.
Yes.
But completely different use case.
Right.
Yeah.
The technology is more like a cousin. The business case is more like another planet, another universe.
Right. So when did you start the company?
We started the company in 2013, very end of 2013. Yes.
So coming on 10 years this year.
Coming on 10 years. So this is the longest time I've held one job. We are now in that realm. But I think about it in terms of really having 3 companies because of how we pivoted. So Pagedip itself is about 6 years old.
Yeah, it is funny. I've tried to explain this to other people before. Like, you can have the same business card for years and years and years, founder and CEO of whatever, and feel like you've had 5 different jobs.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely.
Or even in your case, maybe feel like you've worked for a couple of different companies.
Yes.
Yeah. So, so I'd love to hear a little bit about the transition from big company to small company. Obviously, it took a lot of courage to leave and to start something. What was that transition like? Like, what skills were transferable? Which ones weren't? What did you have to learn? What did you have to relearn? What do you wish you had known ahead of time?
Oh my gosh, those are all really great questions. What I wish I'd learned, what I wish I'd known ahead of time is when you're in a big company, you have a lot of support systems, not to mention, your own personal assistant in some cases. And so the amount of energy that I put into ops right now, even though I have support in that area, still surprises me. So that was the first thing. The leadership skills were certainly directly transferable, and I'm in kind of a different breed. I started my entrepreneurial journey after having a corporate experience and a lot of leadership background and bringing products to market. I think there's some advantages to learning those things in an environment where you've got a lot of support and you aren't worried about payroll and you're able to go to some fantastic leadership opportunities. So I think in some ways it's a good strategy to go and kind of earn your chops, understand budgets, and have to balance a really big budget that's somebody else's to really get that experience. So I'm thankful for that. I think everyone tells you that your first idea isn't your best one from an entrepreneurial standpoint. They talk about product market fit. They talk about being aware of cash flow. But you can't really appreciate all of those things in theory until you've lived them. And so just that there's on-the-job training that comes along with being an entrepreneur that you just can't learn in school. You can't practice. And so it felt a little bit like when I was a good skier and I tried to snowboard, you're like, I know how to come down a mountain, but it's different.
Those two things are very different. Yeah.
So I wish that I sort of appreciated having to have that beginner's mind again.
Yeah.
And not having some conflict in my own psyche about that.
What's an example of something you had to unlearn or relearn?
I love being, quick and agile. And I kind of suppressed that in corporate because, you have to do things by a certain process. And so Alex and I would, change a presentation or make modifications in the car on the way into having the presentation with a customer, or writing code, like just the idea of being really, really fluid and fast. I really, really enjoy that even to this day. And I think that's one of the things why we've got amazing customers and some really large organizations that we work with, because that's the kind of thing that you can't do in corporate, but you can really exploit. It can be a little stressful, if something's not working at the last minute, but there's a little bit of power and freedom associated with it that I really, really
Yeah.
like.
How did you do with the transition around, I guess what I would call sort of scrappiness in engineering, or MVP, right? So you go from leading a team of hundreds of engineers, putting software in cable boxes. There's no room for error.
Yes.
Right. Those things, like it's not quite the same as programming a rocket to go to the moon, but it's there. It has to be bulletproof.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you do, you're probably writing your own code, or you have one engineer working with you, and you're just trying to get something out the door, MVP.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how did your brain make that leap?
Well, having some small wins in the beginning certainly helped. And there was a particular piece of interactivity that we put into ebooks that if you read all the forums, it said that's not possible. And we did it. And I'll never forget, we had a little iPad when they first came out, and we had this interactivity working. And we were talking to somebody at a book show, and we said, we've got this way to be able to, touch on a word and have it expand and do these things. I'm like, well, that's not possible. And we literally pulled out the iPad and said, well, here it is. And the joy of being able to push the boundaries and try things. And we only figured that out because we just kept trying unorthodox ways of manipulating an EPUB file. Like, we just kept, it's one of those, like, we didn't know any better because we didn't come from that industry. So we just kept trying. And that there's a high associated with that keeps you going. That kind of overcomes the fear of not having the Gantt chart project plan like I was used to in past life.
Yeah. It is definitely a different world. So would you ever go back? Like, let's say Pagedip, is incredibly successful. Adobe acquires you, or someone big acquires you. And they say, oh, Sherisse, we want you to be, the SVP of blah, blah, blah. Here, make your home here for the next 5 or 10 years. Do you do that? Or are you like, no, I couldn't possibly think about that again?
I think because I had so many years in corporate, I think I would be a chameleon, and I think I would enjoy, again, you can see the grass is green on both sides. So you could see where you could bring that entrepreneurial spirit, that agility, some creative problem solving, but also have, a great bonus structure or 401k, whatever it is,
right.
And be able to help people even at a larger scale or internationally. So I'm not one of those people that says, oh, I'm not employable anymore. I think it would be a fun challenge, and to bring that kind of entrepreneurial energy, which I think employees in large corporations really appreciate. Like, they're kind of hungering for that. So I think it'd be fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have to wind the clock forward a few years and see. All right, so let's back up again to the minute you decided to become a founder, to become a CEO. So it sounds like that was to one extent, it was driven by, okay, it's the right time for me to leave Big Co. You didn't have a specific idea, but you knew you wanted to do something creative. There are lots of things you could have done in life besides found a company. Why was that where you went?
One thing I want to mention, especially for maybe women founders or people that feel like they are, I don't want to say caregivers, but have other, roles. One of the things for me, I really wanted to make sure that my daughter's 529 was funded. Now, it sounds like such a weird tactical decision point, but for me, it was really important that if I was going to go off and kind of follow this entrepreneurial dream, that I'd also, put systems in place that I could feel comfortable with taking this risk. And I don't think we talk about that enough, of what do you need to have in place for yourself, for your family, for your, whatever your ecosystem is, to be able to take this. It's a wild ride. You strap in like a roller coaster, and there's a lot of twists and turns and upside down parts, right?
Yes, and very limited cash generation for a number of years.
Yes. Yes. So make sure you figure that out. Yeah. I'm an avid reader. I love words. I love how we communicate in different mediums. And that was actually a theme within my career, if you think about it, from, Disney through video. So seeing the potential of what digital content could look like, what long form, text could look like, and just feeling like, wow, there's a huge disconnect between what's possible and what's actually happening, kind of drove me to explore that more. So it came out of a kind of a longing for what I wish there was in the world. And then it kind of went from there.
And what about actually becoming a CEO? Like what was sort of the motivation there? Was it that you wanted to run something? You wanted to lead other people?
Yeah, I'm always been comfortable with being the leader. When you do the group exercises, I was always the person like, well, let's, I'll speak first, which I think is a little bit of a personality trait. But one thing that I've noticed, I'm not sure I'm answering your questions, but one thing I've noticed is I truly believe that we need to be, come into being a CEO or entrepreneurial journey out of a position of serving. Is there a pain point to help someone solve? Is there a need out there? And not from the ego place of, oh, I want to be CEO or I want to be founder. That's not very interesting or important to me. It's, can I make a difference and make something better in a really earnest way? And sometimes I think the media gets that wrong. They make CEOs seem like these real egotistical, and some are, I guess, but egotistical, self-driven individuals. And I come at our whole culture in our company, and I think Bolster's the same, is how can we really serve and make the world a little bit better?
I think that's right. I mean, and it's about, for me, it was always about not just customers, but really employees. And, I used to say when I started ReturnPath that ReturnPath could have done anything. We could have been in the insurance business. We could have been, a retailer. We ended up doing some really interesting stuff in marketing technology, but that, part of why I wanted to start a business is I wanted to create a different kind of workplace. And, really proud of the things we did there. So I'm with you. I think if you become a founder and it's all about you, or it's all about the money, it's a problem. If it's all about the customers, if it's all about your team, if it's all about making, as Steve Jobs said, the dent in the universe,
yes,
you're certainly going to be a lot happier and probably do a better job. So
your expectations will be a little bit more aligned with the job. The
yeah.
CEO job is not an easy one, and often it's not a fun one. Like
Yeah.
it's not as seen on TV.
Yeah, right. Yes, it's not all Shark Tank.
No.
All right, so let me ask, sort of one more question about Pagedip. You said a few minutes ago that you did one big pivot and 3 little pivots along the way, and you talked a little bit about one of them. I think a lot of, I think that the term pivot is probably a little misunderstood by founders, and I think it's probably overused in the world of startups as well. So I'd love to hear you riff on that for a minute. So what did it mean to you to take a pivot? How big a shift was it? It sounded from your story like you were led there by a customer or a prospective customer.
Yes.
But like, how did you know it was the right time to do something different? And and how'd you go about executing a pivot?
Well, that first customer that found us at the book show it was literally a pivotal moment when they said, we have an idea for what we think you could help us with. And we've talked to Apple, we've talked to Microsoft, and we haven't found exactly what we're looking for. And jointly we created exactly what they needed. And it was a fantastic, champagne popping kind of project. And then so we thought, okay, we've made it. We've got this fantastic customer. It turns out that their use case was fantastic, and we learned a lot, and we were both very, very pleased with the outcome, and it went, internationally. However, they had a unique, some characteristics that didn't make that particular use case as reproducible as we assumed. So we had to, in some ways, a little bit go back to the drawing board. About the same time, COVID happened. And so like, a lot of things shifted in terms of how people were consuming content and what they were willing to pay for. And so there's other dynamics that aren't always just around your technology. There's other outside factors that also can impact your business. And then when we discovered, we were doing a number of different pilots, And as soon as we did this sales playbook pilot for the first customer, and then the second customer, and then the third customer, some consistencies of requirements came to be. And we learned, we had refined our what we call granular analytics, so we can really understand what someone's doing in the document. And when people started using the results of those analytics to create a virtuous cycle and improve their content, we're like, it's not a one-time thing, it's a living thing, and it's a continuous thing. And we're seeing better results because of this concept of granular analytics that we really tried as just a, let's see how it goes. Like, it was an idea that we decided to run with, and it wasn't fully baked when we first released it. There was a few pieces of data, and now we've got a ton of data. So it's listening to your customer and sort of anticipating what they might need, and be willing to try and be willing to be wrong. For goodness sakes, that's the piece of, if it doesn't work out, don't be so married to it that you won't let it go.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It also sounds like I think there's sort of there's a line between a pivot and like a restart. And, the pivot, I mean, if you think about the definition of pivot, it is one foot stays in place and the other foot swings around to a different spot.
Yeah.
So, it sounds like at least your big pivot, and presumably your smaller ones too, you still had one foot firmly anchored in what you were doing, but we're trying some other things out around it.
Right. And what we talked about, we used to talk about interactivity and engagement and how beautiful and polished and exciting a document can be. We used to lead with that. And it got some traction. I mean, we had some great customers, but when we added the element of how can you know, what can you know using analytics, that was like the other leg of the stool, or what, so to speak, or the other pillar that really brought everything together. It clicked for us, it clicked for our customers, and it made the product even more unique and sticky. So we had the first two for a while, but when you get that last little piece, it falls into the jigsaw puzzle, and it all kind of clicks. That's a magical moment.
Yeah. All right, let me switch to one last topic. So you've been a founder CEO now for almost a decade. And that's a long time. And I know I've been there as well. How important is it? And how do you think about, the fact that you're in a marathon, you're not in a sprint? How important is kind of self-management or self-care to keeping yourself going and keeping yourself effective as a leader of your team and a visionary at work, sort of day in, day out after 10 years?
Yeah, it's paramount. It really is. And I think I was no different than most founders, which I didn't listen to that. I didn't heed that advice. It's everywhere, it's just everywhere. And
it is now. I'm not sure it was everywhere 10 years ago.
That's true. That's true. But, my motto was, I can sleep when I'm dead, and I can just, work, and I can finish this up. I'll do the second shift, and then I'll do the third shift, and then I'll get up early. It just went on and on and on. And there's always one more thing. And it's not sustainable. Like, you are human, and it's not sustainable. So now, there's periods of, high blood pressure, just like health issues that your body's telling you this is not sustainable. But now there's just a few simple things that I do that I wish I would have told my prior self, just get on the bandwagon and do them now. The first is planning for the next day with a small, what's important, what I'm going to accomplish, and setting some goals. The second is making sure that of the things that I'm going to do, what are the 3 that I'm going to absolutely get done? And it's only 3. I used to have a list of 10 or 11 or 12. Just make sure that there's a small number that are the really important ones, and get those done. And the third thing is sleep. Like, I really was kind of like an anti-sleeper before. And there are studies now that show that not sleeping is the equivalent of, trying to function when you are under the influence of alcohol or drugs. And the clarity, the focus, and the productivity that comes when you have a decent amount of rest. Like, I'm not, saying go crazy, but having consistent sleep is definitely a life hack that I didn't believe in before. And I'm here to tell the world that you should sleep more.
Yeah, that is certainly true. More sleep and quite frankly, more exercise, which usually leads to better sleep and more sleep.
Yes. Yeah.
I always think of both of those as like those are investments in your own productivity. And at some point, the marginal hour is better spent
Right.
getting yourself more productive in the other hours than it
Right.
is doing another hour
Right.
of work.
And interesting about the exercise, I've always been a huge exercise person. That was something that I would not forego, even if it meant I'm going to run the treadmill at 11 because that's the only time I have got.
Yeah.
I noticed that the things I like to do from an exercise standpoint changed. So now I love to do what's called aerial silks, when you climb a silk fabric to a high point in the ceiling and then do a bunch of different reps and then unfurl in a really cool way, like sort of Cirque du Soleil-esque,
Very Disney. Like I'm seeing
yeah, it is very Disney.
like
Yeah.
an image of Rapunzel or something.
Yeah. But one of the things that, compared to running and cycling and swimming and triathlons and things like that I did in the past, it's one of those activities where you have to be fully present. And I've talked to more and more
Right,
entrepreneurs
because
that,
dangerous. It's dangerous if you're
yeah,
not.
it's life, your life depends on it.
Yeah.
And I've found that more and more CEOs and entrepreneurs that I know say that they've found, another, physical activity or meditation where they practice being fully present. And that was a really big shift for me from a long run where, that's a great time to ruminate about what's working and what's not.
Yeah.
When you're about ready to do a double star drop, you are in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And, look, both of them, I don't think there's a right answer. Right? Both of them can be good to clear your head.
Yeah.
But those are very, very different things.
Yes.
All right, Sherisse, it's been great talking to you.
Same.
Thank you so much for being on the Daily Bolster in our first season here. And Sherisse Hawkins, founder and CEO of Pagedip, and by her own definition, corporate escapee.
Thanks for having me.